Welcome into the latest episode of the Dribble Drive podcast, episode 47. As we wrap up the 2024-25 season with our final batch of exit interviews, we'll talk transfer portal, WNBA draft. Austin Render, Dalton Shetler with you. Dalton, good afternoon, sir. How are you on this wonderful tax day, April 15th, the favorite day around all of the nation? We love this day.
As the husband of a CPA, yes, this is normally a pretty big holiday. But yeah, no, it's great. We get to talk some more Big Ten women's basketball. And I know you mentioned, Austin, that we get to the off-season content will be a little bit more infrequent than as this, but we got some stuff still to clean up from the season. I'm excited to go over it.
It feels like with how busy the transfer portal is, we need like an episode a day just to
I was
keep
gonna
track of
go from
everything that's.
weekly to daily.
Yeah, we're gonna go to bi-weekly here coming up, and we're gonna have so much cleanup to do on the portal. But I do think it closes next week, I believe.
I believe a week
Um,
from today, I
Week from
think.
today. Okay. So it is going to close by our next episode. Reminder, you can catch all our episodes on the Back Home Network YouTube channel. You can see the beautiful smiling faces on this program. And then you can catch us in podcast form as well on Apple and Spotify. Give us a rating, subscribe to the YouTube channel. All that stuff really helps us grow our product. I tweeted it out this past week. Just a huge thank you to everybody who has made this first year a giant success. Our numbers have grown big time since we started this podcast, and I'm really, really thrilled with what we've done. But we're going to get better, and year two is going to be better than ever. That's part of the reason we'll go a little bit here, just to let you guys know the schedule. We'll probably go bi-weekly here for the next 2 months or so before we start doing previews. I think the first week of July we'll start hammering previews. So until then, we'll go bi-weekly. We'll bring some fun guests on. We'll try and keep the show really, really fun and informative, but we'll tell some stories with some people. But part of the reason for that is we're also going to, I know we're going to try and work and kind of get in the lab on making the podcast better for next year. I've got some ideas. So we're going to work on that as well. And we're going to bring you a really great product here in year two of the podcast. But thank you all who are watching us right now. Our live viewership has really grown here over the last couple of episodes, which is fun. We had over 100 people join us live for our last episode.
That's awesome.
I think the transfer portal gets people excited, Dalton. There's like that. There's that unknown of like, all right, where's my team gonna go? Who's my team gonna get? Let's just start. Let's jump right into the portal. We'll talk some WNBA draft and some exit interviews as well. Latest, I think about 10 minutes ago, the latest entry, Melanie Daly of Northwestern has jumped into the portal, about a 12, 11 point a game scorer off the bench for Joe McEwen. So that is certainly going to be somebody that could find herself a good landing spot. Let's talk some people that have decided where they're going. Cody McMahon will leave the Big Ten. She's heading to Ole Miss. Lily Meister will leave the Big Ten. She's heading to Kansas. Grace Hall of Penn State is off to SMU. Penn State's Gabby Elliott is going to Arizona State. Purdue's Sophie Swanson to Virginia Tech. UCLA's Elena Arniasalo is off to North Carolina. And Carter
That's a fresh
McRae.
one, too.
What's that?
That's a fresh one. That one happened real recent.
That
like
happened this morning,
24
I
hours.
believe.
Yeah.
Yep. And then Carter McRae to West Virginia. Those are the Big Ten players that are leaving the conference that we don't have to, but we will not be having in the conference next season. There's a lot of good talent there, Dalton, but the list of incoming talent is also really good. I want to throw a couple names at you that are staying in conference. I thought this was an excellent pickup for the Illini. Aaliyah Guyton from Iowa to Illinois. I think she fits the Genesis Bryant, Makaira Cook mold really well. And when you lose those two, I think slipping Guyton in there is going to be perfect.
I think you're spot on. I was really impressed with Guyton coming out of high school. Was watching some of her tape back when she was in high school. Was pretty impressed with her in her freshman year. She just found ways. She always seemed to kind of answer the bell, right? I mean, she was put in some clutch spots. She hit the late three against Iowa State to help propel the Hawkeyes to a win in that Cy-Hawk rivalry game.
Yep.
She just always seemed to step up to the plate, and now she gets an expanded role, which I think she would have had an expanded role at Iowa too, but she gets a huge role where she doesn't just become a role, but more of a centerpiece type player at
Yeah.
Illinois, and I think she's really going to flourish to her max there in Champaign.
They're going to build that ship around her and Barry Wallace in Champaign. And what a 1-2 punch that is in the backcourt. Other in conference transfers, Haley Weaver, a bench piece for Northwestern, is off to Nebraska as they try to replace some of the talent that's leaving there. Mariah Murray has withdrawn her name from the portal. She's going to come back to Penn State, which is big. We're going to preview Penn State, or we're going to look back at Penn State in a minute. They do not have a lot coming back. So for Mariah Murray to decide to come back, that's a big win for Carolyn Keeger. And Rashonda Jones from Purdue to Dalton's Michigan State Spartans. You and I were just talking about it. I was really impressed with her when she burst onto the scene her freshman year. And I think this is going to be a really nice pickup for Michigan State.
Yeah, the spider makes a new web in East Lansing. That's it's really is exciting because I mean, you're talking about a point guard who really has a lot of athleticism, can do a lot of different things you ask of her on the floor. This is another one of those players. I don't watch that many players in high school just because there's a lot going on. But
There's a
Rashonda
lot.
Jones is somebody I paid attention to because she was part of that South Bend, Washington class, and of course, I went to college a short distance from South Bend, so kept tabs. But South Bend, Washington is where Skylar Diggins Smith went and played her high school ball, grew up. And then they had the class with the Reynolds sisters coming through there that played with Rashonda Jones. I mean, so she has been a highly successful, accomplished, talented player from the jump. This past year in Purdue's another team that we'll recap. Purdue had a struggling season. There's no real way to get around it. I think Rashonda Jones was a bright spot on a team that was missing just a lot of pieces. I think she was asked to shoulder maybe a little too much of a load. And I'm really excited because you and I talked her freshman year where there were a couple other pieces like Ashley Stevenson was there in the black and gold that could help out a little bit. I think you get Rashonda around some pieces at Michigan State. This could get interesting.
Totally agree. And I think I can't wait to hear how many ways you work the spider into.
I started brainstorming already. We're working on that.
Yeah, I can't wait. It's the same thing when you guys got Van Sluten. I was like, oh man, he's going to work Van Schuten in there. There's going to be some sort of way he's going to get that in there. Now it's the spider. It's the all-name team that Michigan State's going for, the transfer portal. I absolutely love it. Transfers in, some notable ones headlined by your Spartans again, grabbing Jaylen Brown from Arizona State. Give the folks your brief synopsis of what you know about Jaylen Brown.
Well, one thing that's really interesting is now this is the second straight year Michigan State has grabbed a Sun Devil out of the portal. And last year it served pretty well with Jaden Simmons coming to Michigan State. Played a little bit different. I mean, Jaden Simmons was a great scorer there at Arizona State. She actually left after her 4 years, not to make this a Simmons thing. I'll pivot in a moment. But she had left Arizona State as a 17th all-time leading scorer in that program's history, came to Michigan State, went more for a role of the primary perimeter defensive guard in that starting rotation, running the offense for Michigan State. Jaylen Brown comes over with a similar pedigree, but I think she's going to be used much more as a scorer at Michigan State. She was averaging 18 points a game this last year for the Sun Devils. She was their leading scorer. She's one of the more efficient shooters, and I think that's big for Michigan State too. At times, the Achilles heel for the Spartans could be they just didn't have the perimeter shooting out of maybe their primary lineups. And I think Jaylen Brown, somebody who could step up, knock them down from the perimeter, provide some of that relief that then allows Grace Van Sluten some one-on-ones on the inside. I think this is getting a shot creating, a shot maker on the perimeter for Michigan State was a big target in this portal season. And I think Jaylen Brown delivers that.
That's a huge pickup for Michigan State. Other double-digit scores picked up in the portal. Illinois gets another one, Maddie Weber from Villanova. We saw how the last Villanova to Big Ten transfer worked. Now, Lucy Olson is a special talent, but that's another weapon for Shauna Green and Illinois. Oregon has added a double-double, actually, averaged by Mia Jacobs at Fresno State last year. So as they kind of try to fill the shoes of Philly Che, I would imagine that was a decent idea to go get somebody who averaged a double-double. And Mia Jacobs from Fresno State. Oregon also got Astera Tahina from Washington State, 8 points, 4 assists a game there. So they add some backcourt, they add some front court, which helps them for sure. Purdue gets Taylor Feldman from Northern Arizona, averaged 16 points a game there. I think this is one of the biggest pickups of the portal period here, Dalton. And I might butcher the name. Ashley Solfolkanik from Bucknell to Michigan. A
Oh,
big
yes, I did see that.
6'3", averaged 20 points, 8.5 rebounds a game last year. How many times did we say Michigan was a big away from being like the team? And here they are with all these freshmen coming back. And now they add a nearly double-double averaging big. I know it's Bucknell. Will that travel up to the next level? We'll find out. But I love it. It's not like the portal isn't rich in big talent.
Mhm.
So it is, I think, to go and get one is big time for Kim Barnes-Arico in Michigan. I think that's what they were missing. And I thought maybe they would be in the sweepstakes for Sarah Williams. It turns out they weren't, but they go ahead and they get the big girl from Bucknell.
Well, and the other thing to keep in mind too is that Michigan, when they would go with a center on the floor, was Yulia Grabovskaya, who's actually also transferred in
Yeah.
conference. And we'll actually be touching on that during our exit interviews a little bit with Washington. She ended up there. So not only were they already kind of in need of one, but they lost the one they had on the
Yeah.
roster. So this is a huge piece. But they've been a little bit busy in the portal. Kendall Dudley
Yes.
from
Yep.
UCLA ends up going to Ann Arbor as well. So Michigan's been pretty active so far.
That was another one. There were a couple of kind of role bench players for
Yeah.
UCLA. Zania Soka Nguyen, I believe is how you say it, is coming over from UCLA to Indiana as well.
Yep.
So there's a couple more within the conference that have moved over. Last one worth noting, Faith Blackstone from Stephen F. Austin is heading to Rutgers, a 15-point per game scorer, as they try to fill in the shoes of Kiyomi McMillan, who will be transferring out of the program. So you're always trying to fill some sort of hole, Dalton. And I think at times, to the detriment of high school recruiting, the transfer portal has become that place where you go and you try and find kind of the ramen noodles, the instant meal that you can just put in the microwave and boom, you've got it. You don't want to have to develop somebody when you can just go grab somebody who's already a 15-point a game scorer. So we'll find out how it works for all these schools.
Well, and it's a good analogy. And also, I mean, you mentioned that last week we had a pretty good viewership that joined us live for this, and you said maybe it's because of the portal. And I think we made the comment before, Austin, that the transfer portal in college athletics is starting to catch up a little bit with where the NBA kind of had a pivoting point where the offseason free agency became more entertaining than the
Yep.
actual season and games. I don't think we're there yet with college athletics, but as much as fan bases will be despondent about who they lose, there's hope for
Mm-hmm.
everybody when the
Yeah.
portal opens up that maybe you land that piece or two that changes your season and your team, and it's got everybody glued with attention to it. Look, I think there's a lot wrong currently in college athletics. I think we could all agree there are plenty of flaws, plenty of cracks in the system. But if you want to find a silver lining, maybe it's the best way to put it. Every team can have hope when the portal opens.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I also think viewership might be up because of you. Sarcastic Mike says, as much as he liked me, adding Dalton has really given the show more depth. And I
Oh wow.
agree, Sarcastic
Thanks.
Mike. I
I-
couldn't have kept doing
Is
it myself.
is that sarcastic coming from him though? It does beg the question.
We don't know.
Yeah,
Are all his comments sarcastic? We don't know. We
it'd be
do
a good
like
character.
we do enjoy people dropping in the comments, letting us know if you have any questions about stuff. We love audience interaction. So thank you,
Thank you.
sarcastic Mike. He said he said it's not sarcastic. He says no.
That's good. Thank you, Mike.
So thank you, sarcastic Mike.
Appreciate you.
Okay, so that's kind of the portal summation. Again, there's still so much happening. I mean, I think the big one is like, where's Sarah Williams going to go? That's the one that's kind of still looming. There's some others certainly that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head, but it's still a revolving door here for the next week or so. I think it's the deadline to enter is next week, but
Correct.
we could still hear things happening
Yes.
after that. So it's just gonna maybe stop the people jumping into the portal unless there's a coaching change. Then it all resets and everything happens there.
One other thing that I find kind of interesting, and I know we still got to get to the WNBA draft and we got to get to exit interviews, so I'll be quick here. But I think Talia Goodman actually pointed out on social media that although the women have 1,300 players in the portal right now, it's
Hmm.
something like that. The men have about 1,000 more
Yeah,
right now. We're seeing a really disproportionate number in the portal between the men and women, where you're talking about 2,200 on the men's side, somewhere in that ballpark that are in there. I found that to be interesting. I don't have a reason or a logic for it, but I thought that was interesting nonetheless.
it's a massive number on both sides,
Yeah.
and it's hard to believe that you can get that many more on the men's side, but they have. So it's kind of where we're at. It'll be interesting to see the domino effect of what's going on down in Tennessee right now, how
Yeah.
that might impact college athletics moving forward. I think there's a lot of coaches and ads that are probably happy to see what Tennessee did,
Yeah.
kind of standing up for their program down there. So we'll see how that all unfolds. Let's talk some draft. We had the WNBA draft last night. Paige Becker's number one. I don't think anybody was surprised by that one. That was the worst kept secret there for the Dallas Wings. But you've got Kiki Iriafen going fourth overall to the Washington Mystics, who were busy last night. My gosh, did they have a lot of draft? They could put a whole starting five out there with their draft picks they took last night. Because they also took Lucy Olson in the second round, the
Yep.
23rd overall pick. In between those two, Cheyenne Sellers goes to the new Golden State Valkyries team with the 17th overall pick. And then there was a slew of Lucy Olson actually started a string of Big Ten players going late in the second round. Delia Daniels goes to Minnesota, and Rhea Marshall goes to Connecticut. So two really established post players who had great years for Washington and USC, respectively. Then a couple of late third round picks. Jordan Hobbs goes to Seattle, and Taylor Theory is off to Atlanta. Now, the thing about the WNBA draft is if you're not in the first round, you do still kind of have to earn that roster spot. There is a
Mhm.
lot to there's smaller teams, there's not as many teams, and so you do kind of have to if you're a first round pick, you're pretty much going to be there for the upcoming season. But if you're not, you got to go into training camp and you got to go earn your spot. So we'll see some of these names. I would imagine they're going to earn their way on. Somebody like a Lucy Olson feels fit for the WNBA. I think Delia Daniels as well is going to be a really nice pick and pop addition to somebody, whether it's who drafted her Minnesota or somebody else. But exciting to see so many Big Ten names be a part of it. Dalton, I saw that Julia Aralt signed a free agent deal post the draft. Is that correct?
She's got the invitation for the Phoenix
That's right.
Mercury camp.
Yep. And that's part of
Um,
it too. That there's some invitations that undrafted people will get to come participate in the summer workouts to see if they can work their way onto the team as well.
and you laid out the context, Austin, that the WNBA might be as cutthroat as it gets when it
Yeah.
comes to competing for roster spots
Yep.
among all the professional sports. And usually, if you're in the first round, you're kind of safe. The big surprise to me of the night, Big Ten and beyond, was Cheyenne Sellers falling to 17. I thought really the Valkyries got a steal with her at 17. That's somebody who's a first round type talent, and I
Yep.
think she's going to prove that pretty quickly with some of this work. But Cheyenne falling to 17, and how about this too? Congratulations to her. I think some people saw on social media, but she got engaged to her fiance and former teammate at Maryland, Faith Masonis. Thought that was a pretty neat thing. And a couple days later, she's hugging her dad, Brad Sellers, at the WNBA draft as she's picked. That's quite the whirlwind for her.
Very cool. Yeah, what a great time for Cheyenne Sellers. And like you said, I would be shocked if it doesn't work out
Yeah.
there in Golden State for Cheyenne Sellers. Okay, let's transition to exit interview part two. We got 7 teams in last week. Dalton stretching as we get ready to get 11 teams in here. We're gonna get to everybody who hasn't been talked about yet. We discussed everyone from Illinois to Minnesota in the first episode. So we'll start with Nebraska, which is my team that I had. Alexis Markowski was the story of the season for Nebraska, a 16-point-a-game score, 8 rebounds, really kind of added. She had the three-point shot, but it felt like it was more of a part of her arsenal this season. I think back to the Oregon game where she hit 6 3-pointers in that game. But the storyline that loomed over the entire season was Natalie Potts, and she plays 5 games, tears her ACL, misses the rest of the season. She was averaging 14.5 points, 7.5 rebounds a game. So she goes out. It takes Nebraska some time to kind of find their footing. And Britt Prince really stepped up as the year went on, a 40% three-point shooter. I was really impressed with Alberti Rimdahl and her development as the year went on. Logan Nisley, Callan Hake, Jessica Petrie, they were all great pieces, but the struggle for Amy Williams was, could they put it all together consistently? It felt like one night somebody was on, one night the other person was on. They needed more, and I think that's where Natalie Potts would have been a consistent piece in that puzzle. But I think their best win was the win at number 17 Maryland, in a time where you and I were kind of starting to have the intervention moment with Nebraska. Like, what are you guys doing? Because that was their other point of adversity. There was the Natalie Potts injury, but there was also the 3 straight double-digit losses in February to Indiana, Michigan, and Iowa. And then the next game was at Maryland. And then they had to go to Illinois, I believe, in their next game. So it was really looking like, what are we doing here? And then they're down double digits to Maryland in the first quarter, and they storm back and blow them out. They're up by as many as, I think, 28 in this game at one point. They win it by 20. Just a total dominating performance. Other moment that was a ton of fun was there were 2 overtime wins at Iowa, which was kind of coined the Britt Prince game. She was so good in that game down the stretch. And then in February, the Alexis Markowski game, as I mentioned, against Oregon at home, again on the bubble, needing a win against another bubble team, and they did it. And that was without Britt Prince, who at that time was out with the ankle injury she had suffered the game before against Illinois. And Markowski just kind of put the team on her back and led them to the victory. They ultimately bow out in the first round of the NCAA tournament to Louisville. But there's a lot to build around for this team. You don't see this very often, Dalton, but in players in the portal next to Nebraska, 0. Nothing. Now, Alexis Markowski graduates. That's a big loss. Mm-hmm. But here are the names that are coming back. Natalie Potts, hopefully healthy off that ACL injury. Britt Prince, Logan Nisley, Callan Hake, Jessica Petrie, Petra Bojan, Amaya Hargrove. There's a lot of youth and a lot of talent. And this is where Amy Williams' strategy of playing a ton of people throughout the season, I think, is going to benefit them, because now you have this long list of like 8 people returning with valuable experience. Somebody like Petra Bojan was Alexis Markowski's backup, but she got a ton of valuable minutes in the Big Ten. And I think that's going to really help her this year. I think Amaya Hargrove had some really good moments in the Big Ten as well. And as we mentioned, some of those role players like Nisley, Hake, and Petrie, can they kind of take that step forward next year? They all average between 6.5 and 7 points a game. But I think the core is Natalie Potts and Britt Prince. Yep. We mentioned that they did bring in Haley Weaver from Northwestern. I think will be a nice piece to the puzzle there for Nebraska. But they have a lot to build on. One of the few teams in this conference, I would put them kind of with a Michigan as to like bringing in a really big chunk of their production back next season, and no transfers out is extremely rare. Now, it can still change. There is still a week left. That is obviously the caveat to all of this. But as of right now, that's the big building point and selling point, I think, for Amy Williams and her program right now is, hey, we got everybody coming back outside of Markowski. Everybody else coming back. Alberti Rimdahl graduates as well. But they've got a lot of pieces and a lot to build around.
which is really exciting. And just to kind of put a bow on Nebraska, or at least an observation for me, is Markowski obviously was dominant, right? I mean, we have never seen anybody in that Husker program have the double double she had,
Yeah.
that kind of the attention she commanded on the floor set up for a lot of the things on the perimeter for Nebraska. So the big question to me is, because I like Prince and Potts coming back, Austin, but I think if you don't have a dominant piece that's a back to the basket player like Markowski for next year, some of these guards have got to be able to beat their defenders off the dribble. The play style is going to have to move a little bit from what they've been doing, but I still think there's a path there.
They're actually a little bit, they remind me a little bit of Indiana last year, losing Holmes, but bringing back a good chunk of the role players.
It's a good point.
Can you figure out a way to play maybe a different style where Indiana, it took the Hoosiers a month or two to kind of figure that out.
Yeah.
And then they kind of became a better team by February. Can Nebraska figure out, okay, life without Markowski, that's not somebody you can just go and pick out of the portal. That's a talent, like you said, that's one of the best that they've ever had. So can their guards take those steps forward? It
Yeah.
really does feel kind of similar. Indiana didn't lose anybody in the portal last year. Nebraska hasn't lost anybody in the portal. Hopefully, for Nebraska's sake, they don't have 6 people into the portal the
I didn't want to
following
make a
year.
joke.
That's where we hope the comparison ends for Nebraska fans. But I do think that's actually pretty similar,
Yeah.
to teams. Okay, Ohio State. This is a
Oh,
team that, or no,
do
it's
you
not
want to
Ohio
pinball?
State. That's my next team. You're up.
Yeah, no, you're good.
You've got
But Northwestern?
Northwestern. Yeah,
Yeah,
let's do
let's go with the
Northwestern.
Wildcats. Northwestern obviously had a bit of a difficult season, missed the Big Ten tournament. They went 9-18 for the year. Their biggest win, I think you go back to the beginning of the season, November 14th, they defeated Utah
Yeah.
71-69 at the time. That was an NCAA tournament team that, of
Mhm.
course, lost to Indiana in the NCAA tournament.
And a
But they,
Utah team that went on to beat Notre Dame like
yeah,
a week later. Yeah.
yeah. Like that was a big win for Northwestern. I think that's the best you could point to. They were down 14 in the second half, by the way, against the Utes before coming back and winning it. Kaylee Walsh, if you remember, hit the game winner with 3 seconds left. But that, I think, is the shining moment for the Wildcats from last season. The adversity, if you count the forfeits from not going out to LA, the Wildcats lost 11 straight games from December 28th to February 6th. So they went all of January
Oh,
without a win. That's just
that's
tough.
hard.
Yeah, it's a lot of adversity. Kaylee Walsh was the leading scorer, 12.5 points a game. Taylor Williams was at 12 points and about 9.5 rebounds a game. Melanie Daly, who we mentioned earlier, is going to be transferring out, scored 12 a game. Grace Sullivan, 10 a game. And Caroline Lau had 162 assists on the year. They really didn't go to the bench very much. I mean, they kind of rolled out 5, played those 5. But Walsh, Williams, and Daly, those top 3 scorers are all gone. So you wonder where Northwestern picks up the pieces. You mentioned earlier, too, Haley Weaver on the way out. But the thing I wanted to kind of round Northwestern out about, Austin, is that Joe McEwen, the winningest coach in Northwestern history, has announced that this will be his final season coming up. He'll be retiring at the end of this upcoming season. And I put down some notes just so we can celebrate Joe McEwen and the career he's had so far. This will be his 18th season at Northwestern, his 40th as a head coach overall, winningest active women's basketball head coach in the Big Ten. And as we mentioned, winningest in Northwestern history, 268 wins, took them to the NCAA tournament 2 times, got their first Big Ten title in 30 years back in 2020, had 26 wins that year. That was a program record. And he gave Northwestern the first NCAA tournament victory in 28 seasons back in 2021. So Joe McEwen has done a lot of great things there, and this will be the final ride for Joe McEwen.
I think that 2020 team was one of the bigger teams in the country robbed by COVID.
Yeah,
Because that team was so good. Veronica Burton leading the charge. That Blizzard defense was in full effect, and they had won the Big Ten. They were going to be a host school, and to have that yanked away, they haven't. You mentioned they got the tournament win in the bubble in 21, but since then they just have not really recovered. That year in 2020, man, that team was unbelievable. So we will certainly be recognizing Joe McEwen throughout the upcoming season in his farewell tour there at Northwestern. Okay, now Ohio State, which is a team that you and I really struggled to figure out throughout
Yep.
the season. This was a team that when I sat here and I was trying to think of like their best wins and their best moments, it was honestly hard because Ohio State was the epitome of beat the teams worse than them for the most part and lost to the teams better than them. They
Mhm.
went to LA, they got handed it to them by, I mean, that was one of their low moments of the year. They were out rebounded by USC 62-30, and they
Yeah.
lost that game and lost both games in LA. But they beat most of the teams below them in the Big Ten, including teams like Michigan and Michigan State and Illinois. They did a good, and Maryland one of two times. So they beat the teams they were supposed to beat outside of the Penn State game, which is still one of the biggest anomalies of the season.
Yeah.
But just a team that I felt like had more potential than what they ended up displaying by season's end. They were a 4 seed. They got beat at home by Tennessee. And to be honest with you, I think you and I both picked that Tennessee win to happen. Like it just
Yeah.
kind of felt like they weren't coming in with a lot of momentum. Indiana had beaten them late in the year. Maryland beat them late in the year. They almost lost to Iowa in the Big Ten tournament. Then they get blown out by UCLA. So there was not a lot of positive mojo going on for Ohio State. When they had faced good teams in LA, they had gotten blown out. So it was like, it kind of felt like they did what they did what like it wasn't that they weren't deserving of a host spot, but it just kind of felt like there was a ceiling to this Ohio State team, even though I felt like the talent was better than that ceiling. It's a hard team for me to put my arms around as to what they were. Cody McMahon was the leading scorer. She obviously, as we mentioned at the top of the show, is off to Ole Miss. Jelani Cambridge will come back as the leading returning scorer. She was terrific. 15 and a half a game, led the team with 113 assists, second with 59 steals. Chance Gray was a 12-point-a-game scorer, great three-point shooter. They'll get her back next year. Taylor Theory off to the WNBA was just the Swiss Army knife for this team for years. She was so underappreciated in her role with this team. They grabbed Asia Petty from Kentucky out of the portal. She had her good moments, but I think she left a little bit to be desired from what she looked like in the non-conference season, took a bit of a step back in Big Ten play. I think their best win, though, was probably the win at Michigan pretty early in the Big Ten season. They trailed by 13 at halftime in that game and came back and won by 7. I think one of their better moments in terms of them looking like the team we all expected them to be was against the Spartans. They're in
Yep.
late February. They looked like a team that could make a really serious run.
That was
But
their best
again,
performance of the year.
no
Best
doubt. And
performance.
it's an 11-point win that was that's probably not as much of a blowout as it was.
Correct.
Yeah, I think Michigan
Without Theron
State.
Halleck just going unconscious for Michigan State, it's probably a 20-point loss. I mean,
Yeah,
Ohio State just was as good as they could be in that
and
game.
that isn't a shot at Michigan State. I just think that Ohio
Agreed.
State was so good in that game. 11
Yeah.
points doesn't do justice as to how good they were in that contest. But again, they bow out early in the NCAA tournament. It's the second straight year they've been upset on their home floor in the NCAAs. So now, where do you go from here? So 2 portals out, Cody McMahon, Faith Carson, a bench piece. They do bring a decent amount back. Both Cambridges, obviously Jelani is the headliner, but Kennedy Cambridge was a solid bench piece for them last year. She comes back. Chance Gray is back. Elsa Lemula gave them really good minutes throughout the season as their backup big. She is back. Ava Watson, a young freshman, will come back as well. But they lose the likes of Taylor Theory, Cody McMahon, Asia Petty, Madison Green. So there will be a bit of a regroup for Ohio State, who has yet to grab anybody out of the portal yet. I still think that Kevin McGuff's an excellent coach, one of the longest tenured coaches in this conference. He's put together winning season after winning season. They're only 1 year removed of winning this conference. And if it weren't for the LA schools, they would have won it again.
Mhm.
So you think about old Big Ten conference, this would have been Ohio State winning it again this season. So that's got to be an attractive spot for transfer additions, and there's still a lot of talent in the portal. So I expect Ohio State to go grab some. But just a bit of a head scratcher this year, Dalton, because I think for most teams, you get to the tournament, you're a hosting school, that's a good year. But I think for Ohio State, you would probably grade this season in a B minus, C plus type of way, probably. Like you did what you needed to do to pass the class, but you didn't stay for any extra credit. You didn't do anything extracurricular. No above and beyond performances on exams. It just kind of felt like your B to B minus type of performance from Ohio State this year.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I completely agree with you. I thought there was so much left in the tank for them. I thought there was so much more that they could have grabbed. Just couldn't put those pieces together. But maybe a team of the opposite, silk or cloth, Oregon, and that's
Yeah.
the next group up. I mean, this was a typical Kelly Graves team in season, was it not? This was a grinded out kind of team, a team that just anchors you down into the mud, slows you down, makes everything just challenging. I don't know that this team could have done much better than what it did, making it into the NCAA tournament. They finished 20-12 on the season. If you want to point to some of the best wins, beating number 12 Baylor back at the beginning of the year, November 10th, 76-74, beating Iowa 50-49. That was on January 19th. Had the win over number 16 Michigan State at the time, 63-59. That was on January 30th. And then, of course, the NCAA tournament win over Vanderbilt and one of the more star-studded backcourts featuring Michaela Blakes. They got that win 77-73 in the NCAA tournament. And since Oregon was a 10 seed in the tournament, that now gives Kelly Graves 10 wins as a double-digit seed in the NCAA tournament. That's the most among active D1 head coaches, and that feels appropriate, right? Like that's exactly what we're talking about. Anytime you were going down your schedule and you saw Oregon coming up this year, I think everybody kind of gave a groan like, can we just get through that one? It just was a frustrating type of team to play against. If you wanted to point to some adversity, I would say from the beginning of February to the end of February, this team only beat one NCAA tournament team. They beat Washington on February 12th, 68-67. Outside of that, they couldn't get any of those caliber wins in February, but still overall great season. Deja Kelly, Peyton Scott led the way. Kelly had more than 12 points a game. Peyton Scott was at 10 points a game. But now you kind of wonder what else is next. Deja Kelly's gone. Philly Che's gone. Of course, she was a huge rim presence on the interior for the Ducks this season. Peyton Scott is gone. Nani is gone. I'm blanking on how to pronounce the last name, so I'm just going to move past it. But the point is, like, there's a lot of pieces to work on for the Ducks. You had mentioned a couple that I didn't even see that come in. The Fresno State edition, Mia Jacobs. Astera Tahira, is that who you said was the other piece that came in?
Tahina.
Tahina.
Yeah.
That's my handwriting, of course. And then they also got one of the bench pieces from the Bruins of UCLA, Avery Kane,
Yep.
transferred into Oregon. So they have done some work in the portal. I think by all accounts, you and I had talked about it throughout the season, Austin. This was a team you felt like the talent had a certain ceiling, but I just felt like they reached that ceiling, and they did it by just grinding all the opposition in the Big Ten down to kind of withering halt.
Yeah, and if there's a team we have confidence in that can hit the portal hard, it's Oregon. I mean, look at
Yeah.
what they did last year. They had nothing coming back except for pretty much Philly Che and Peyton Scott, who had been hurt, and they go out and they assemble a team. Deja Kelly, I think, could be on your list of snubs last night from the WNBA draft. She did not get picked. Was a little surprised by that. I think she has a game that's going to work pretty well in the WNBA if she gets a shot at it. So, but she'll be missed there at Oregon, no doubt about it. She was very impactful. Moving on to Penn State, another one of those teams that did not have a great season. This was a tough go around after a season where they were a win or two away from sneaking into the NCAA tournament last year. This year they took a step back. They lost pretty much everybody in the portal before the season, so they had to go out and assemble a whole new team. And Gracie Merkel was the leader. She was a transfer from Bellarmine, averaged over 15 a game, almost 9 rebounds a contest. She is now off to Maryland, an intra-conference transfer there. Gabby Elliott was also really good for Penn State, and she has also transferred out of the program, but 13 and a half points, 42% three-point shooting. Mariah Murray had a really hot start to the year, was a dynamic three-point shooter, cooled off in Big Ten play, but she'll kind of be the one to build around next year for Caroline Keeger as she comes back. Their best win is still one of the best wins anybody got in the Big Ten last year, 62-59 over Ohio State. They started the season 8-0, had a win over Georgia down in Orlando at the ESPN Wide World of Sports, some sort of invitational down there. And it kind of felt like a really, okay, we got something going here with all these pieces that we're trying to put together, and it just never panned out. The adversity was pretty much all Big Ten season long. They won just one game in conference play. They lost some games to the teams kind of down to the bottom of the standings that had they beaten them once or twice, they would have snuck into the Big Ten tournament. But it just wasn't Penn State's year. And now they're really back in the same position they were in last offseason. Gracie Merkel, Gabby Elliott, Allie Campbell, Grace Hall, Talia Walker, and it's a total of 8 Penn State players that are in the portal. Mariah Murray entered it, has since come back. So she's the building piece, but they're going to have to hit the portal hard again, and they're going to have to try and find some pieces to put around Mariah Murray. There's one of those teams that we talked about with Michigan and with Nebraska. There's a lot to build around. There's a lot, I think, of optimism. Penn State's on the other side of like, I don't know. I don't know yet. And it's April 15th. We're not going to make sweeping declarations here of what teams are going to look like. When we preview Penn State in the summer, they may have this fully tooled roster that looks a lot better on paper. But right now, there's some question marks and concerns in Happy Valley of what this team might look like.
I completely agree. I think you nailed it. And I think the next team we look at is in that same mold as well. As we are now 12 teams down, 6 to go in the exit interview. So the home stretch, we got a third.
Watch out.
But that next team is the Purdue Boilermakers. They went 10-19 this year, 3-15 in the Big Ten. You go to best win. I pointed to their best Big Ten win, which was Wisconsin, 84-71, back on February 2nd. They will have, for a top returner, Kendall Puryear, just north of 7 points per game, should be back. Lena McCarthy had 6.5 points a game. McKenna Layden should be back at 4.5 points per game. I haven't seen any transfer news on any of them hitting the portal, so I believe all 3 of them are back. But in the same breath, Austin, this is what they lose. We already talked about Rashunda Jones going to Michigan State, averaging around 10 points per game as their point guard. Destiny Lombard was their actual highest score at 9.9 points per game. She's in the portal. Sophie Swanson already committed to Virginia Tech. She was at 8.9 points per game. Reagan Bass, 7.9 points per game. She's left for the portal. You had mentioned that there's a transfer. I actually learned some of the transfer news that you were going through. That so one from Northern Arizona comes into West Lafayette.
Yeah.
But much like you said about Penn State, and again, you don't want to make any definitive statements at this point on April 15th. We'll still see what the roster is, but there's a lot of question marks with this roster too. It lost a lot of its top production, and it was a team that really struggled this past year. On a personal note, when it comes to Purdue, I love Katie Geralds. I love Katie Geralds as a head coach. I'm very biased here. Back in the NAIA days when I was in college and playing at Goshen College, she was the head coach of the Marion women's team, took that team to a national championship while I was in college, been around her for some time. I think she's always done great work, really rooting hard for her. It's just a tough pill to swallow what this past year was. And again, with the question marks that loom ahead of next year's roster, you really hope I really hope for Katie Geralds that she's able to figure it out there at Purdue.
For what it's worth, I think that both Reagan Bass and Destiny Lombard are out of eligibility. I don't think they're in the portal.
Oh, you might be right. Thank you for that correction.
Either way, they're not coming back. But
I just put lost on my paper. But
I believe they both graduated. But it's the same difference for Purdue and the fact that they are gone. It's a tough spot for Purdue because in your state alone, you've got Indiana and Notre Dame that are attractive destinations. And just across the border into Illinois, Shauna Green has made the Illini a very attractive destination. And so you're kind of surrounded by all these schools. I mean, there's 2 schools in Michigan that have become very attractive destinations.
And
Ohio
then there's
State
Ohio
is what they
State.
are there. So just kind of you're surrounded by a bunch of magnets that bring in talent. So how do you, as Purdue, go and break through that? And I think what Katie Geralds was trying to do is bring in some of the talent from the smaller level, like she was, and see if that would work. It hasn't quite panned out yet. So we'll see what the strategy is this summer for Katie Geralds. I'm with you. She seems like a really excellent person, has done a lot of good things in her coaching career, but I do think that she will have to kind of get this thing going. I think she had that year 2 years ago where it was kind of a ahead of schedule type of year, very similar
Yeah.
to Illinois.
Yeah.
Was it 3 years ago now? That was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
3 years ago where they made the first 4 in the NCAA tournament. I think since then they've taken that step back, obviously. So we'll see if they make a jump forward this coming season. Another team trying to do the same is Rutgers, a team that has the history very similar to Purdue, where they have a lot of really good history in women's basketball. Purdue actually remains the only active Big Ten team to have won a national title back in 1999, with both LA schools coming up short in this year's tournament. Rutgers is a team that you remember C. Vivian Stringer and what she did for this program for so long. But since she left and kind of at the end of her tenure, it has taken a step back. Kaomi McMiller was supposed to be like the girl, like the person to build this program around. And she showed it off. She had several 30-point games, almost single-handedly beat Nebraska herself, was an 18-plus point a game scorer. And her paired with Destiny Adams down low, who was nearly a double-double per game, was a really good combo. What they lacked was depth. They had some injuries that really hurt them throughout the season. They didn't have a whole lot in terms of depth developed. JoJo Lacey kind of came along as the year went on, another freshman. But that depth was tested even more when Kaomi McMiller kind of at one point was suspended, and then it kind of felt like she took a step away. And we don't totally know what happened with the whole Kaomi McMiller situation, but she didn't play after the Indiana game in early February, wouldn't play the rest of the year, entered the portal. They've also lost Maya Petticord and Lisa Thompson to the portal. I would say their best moments of the year were probably a couple of wins against Penn State, a thrilling overtime win on the road, and then they punched their ticket to the Big Ten tournament with the season finale win over Penn State. But JoJo Lacey comes back. Zakara Perkins comes back. Antonia Bates comes back. So they have some pieces, but they lose their top 2, which is Kaomi McMiller and Destiny Adams. Adams to graduation, McMiller to the portal. We don't know where she's going yet. But it'll be interesting to see what Rutgers does. They have added some talent in the portal. We mentioned one earlier with Faith Blackstone from Stephen F. Austin, a 15-point-a-game scorer. We know Coquise Washington can do it in this conference. She did it at Penn State in the mid-2010s. So we know she can do it. It's just a matter of building this Rutgers program back to where it was under C. Vivian Stringer, because recently they have taken a step back.
No, that's completely fair. Next up, we got the LA schools, and both of these are pretty interesting because they had wildly successful seasons. But this offseason, there's been a lot of movement on both of these rosters. We'll start with UCLA. Of course, the Bruins. The summary of the season is almost going to be short in a good way because we all know what it was, right? It was 34-3 for the Bruins. They win 16-2 in the Big Ten. Their only 2 losses in the conference were to that other LA school, USC. And of course, the third loss was to UConn in the Final Four. Capped off the first Final Four appearance in program history. And Corey Close ends up being your National Coach of the Year. Lauren Betts is your National Defensive Player of the Year. If you're looking for best wins, I pointed to the win over LSU to get to that first Final Four. I think that's important for program's sake. 72-65. That was on March 30th in the Elite Eight. Also, I thought the win over USC on March 9th in the Big Ten Tournament Championship game, I think that was a confidence injector before they got into the NCAA tournament because, again, it's a team that was just a well-oiled machine. Lauren Betts was dominant all season, and you had shooters spread around on the outside. And we've talked about this at maybe nauseum, Austin, just how efficient of a system it was for UCLA, and they ran it so well. So then they get those 2 points of adversity where USC picks them off twice, and they end up losing the Big Ten regular season championship. Now they've got to see USC again in the Big Ten tournament championship game, but this time they beat them. And you saw the jubilation, you saw the relief in that post game of UCLA. And I think that might have catapulted them forward to a Final Four run in this tournament. And look, UConn was a buzzsaw through this tournament. I haven't seen too many teams run through competition the way UConn did this year. If they don't run into UConn, maybe who knows what exactly the path is for UCLA. They were playing that well. This is where it gets a little bit interesting. We'll talk about what's coming back first. Lauren Betts is back, more than
Huge
20 points a game.
in multiple ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Lauren Betts is back, 20 points a game, 10 rebounds a game, had 100 blocks this previous season. Kiki Rice is back. That's your second leading scorer, 13 points a game, 170 assists. Charlize Leger-Walker is back. She missed this past season at UCLA, but she came from Washington State, where she left third all-time in career points with 1,743, second in made threes with 199, and she was fourth all-time in Wazoo history for assists with 389. So UCLA didn't even have her this past season and made it to the Final Four. You add that in, you see maybe what happens there with the Bruins. Gabrielle Hawkes is back again for the Bruins at 9.5 points a game. Tamia Gardner's back, 7.6 points a game, made 64 threes. And Amanda Muse is coming back as well, one of the role players. And this was announced within the last 24 hours, but Angela Dugalich still has a year of eligibility remaining.
Oh, she's going to use it.
She is coming back to UCLA.
I guess I should have noticed that when she wasn't drafted, because I think there's a lot of high hopes for her in the WNBA draft.
Yeah. So she announced on Twitter, X, whatever you call it, that she's coming back and using that last year. So that was huge news for UCLA.
Huge.
Now for the pieces they're missing. We've talked about some of them already. We mentioned Kendall Dudley, one of the role players, bench players for UCLA, is going to Michigan. Arna Salo going to North Carolina. We talked about Zanaya Saka-Newman. Is that how we said it to Indiana? I don't want to butcher it.
Zania Soka Nguman, I believe, is phonetically how it was. I can probably say it smoother.
Butchered it.
Yeah, I'll probably. I mean, look, come back to me in September. I'll ask her. I'll have her say it to me, and then I'll have it down.
Well, I almost wanted to turn around. I still have all the prep sheets from this past season sitting over there over my shoulder, and I was like, I know it's phonetically in there, but whatever. The other pieces. This is where it gets a little bit interesting too. We talked about Avery Kane leaving UCLA, but Janiyah Barker, who is the Big Ten Sixth Player of the Year, is in the transfer portal, and London Jones, who was their best outside shooter, hits the transfer portal as well.
Are those recent? Because I didn't notice those at first. Yeah. Because I didn't even add those to my list at the top of the show, because I did not realize that.
Yeah, and they haven't picked destinations yet. But they're, at least to my knowledge, but they're both in the portal. And that's where this gets a little bit interesting for UCLA, because London Jones was a key piece to one of the artillery attack from the perimeter that UCLA put on surrounding Betts. And Janiyah Barker, look, Lauren Betts missed a game this year. It happened to, of course, be against Michigan State. Janiyah Barker's a starter just about everywhere else, just besides behind Lauren Betts. She played phenomenal in that game. She played great all year. It's just you also had the National Defensive Player of the Year and one of the great players in this conference in Lauren Betts, one of the top two, what this season was. So it's really interesting. If we're recapping what this past season was, A+ from UCLA, right?
Yeah.
You can't really do much better. Maybe you pick off one of the LA schools, the way UConn was playing. I don't know. But not one of the LA schools, but you pick them off one of the times that you played them in the regular season to finish with a regular season title was my point. But overall, this was an amazing season for UCLA. They have the big pieces to still come back and work around with Betts and Rice, Hawkes back, getting Leger-Walker back from that injury is big, but losing Jones and Barker are interesting, and it'll be interesting to see maybe how they shore those pieces up.
Yeah, they're in a better spot than our next team in USC
Yes.
because there's more of the core coming back for UCLA. But just to kind of touch on what you said, like I think it's an A plus because look, Final Fours aren't easy,
Yeah.
especially in women's basketball when you typically get look, there's more parity in the game than there used to be, but it feels like two of the spots are always going to be harvested by South Carolina and UConn. Like
Yep.
those two are there more often than not. So that leaves you two spots available. And recently, Iowa and LSU have jumped in there. We've seen Notre Dame in there plenty of times, Stanford. But to have UCLA get in, I believe their first ever Final Four
Yes.
on the
At
women's
least
side.
since but they had success obviously during the AIAW days, but their
Yes.
first ever Final Four as part of the NCAA format.
So there we go. So I think look, you were ranked number one for most of the year. You're undefeated for a long time in the year. I get it that UCLA fans probably feel a little bit like they missed an opportunity this year, but making a Final Four is nothing to hang your head over. It's something that almost everybody in the country is trying to do, and almost everybody in the country doesn't accomplish. So look, there's worse ways that you could have bowed out. I've seen them personally. When you have a great team, you can get upset. They weren't upset. They beat teams they were supposed to beat. That win over LSU, like you said, was huge, and they just ran into a buzzsaw. And
Yeah.
sometimes that happens. I think they're in a decent spot because of their core coming back. Duke makes a big difference there.
Yes.
I'm sure it'll be an attractive spot for a couple of role players in the transfer portal who want to go and win. But USC's in a different spot.
Oh,
So let's
and
talk about
I'm sorry to interrupt you just for
yes.
a moment. I
Yep.
don't know, like, look, this is the easiest statement ever, right? UConn women's basketball is ridiculously good. But you talked about that two Final Four spots seem to be harvested or just owned by South Carolina and UConn each year.
Mm-hmm.
Do you realize UConn's only missed the Final Four one time since 2008? And that was in 2023. They made it 08, 09, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, COVID, 21, 22, 24, 25. So just to bring truth to power to what you're saying there,
Yeah. Like
that's
South Carolina's in there every year. They've been in, I think, like what, 6 or 7 straight. I should know
yeah,
this. I prepped it. But yeah, I mean,
that's
there's two
insane.
spots available every year. That's all there is.
Unstarted. I mean, we're somewhat close to the same age. When they started winning or going to the Final Four every single year. I mean,
It's
that's
incredible.
insane.
It's incredible
Insane.
what those two programs have done. And then you've got what Vic Schaefer's doing at Texas and what Kim Mulkey's doing at LSU and then Notre Dame and Stanford. And yeah, it's hard. So UCLA getting in, very valuable.
Yep.
Let's talk USC, who failed to reach the Final Four. I don't think by in their own efforts.
Doing.
They certainly
Yeah.
gave it everything they had, but their leading scorer and the best player, maybe in the country, you could have argued for Paige Beckers either way. Juju Watkins, 24 points a game, 7 rebounds, had 113 assists, 72 steals, 58 blocks. She, of course, tears her ACL in the Mississippi State game in the second round of the NCAA tournament, misses the rest of the tournament. We'll talk about the outlook in a moment. Kiki Iriafen was such a great addition for Lindsey Gottlieb and this USC squad. 18 points, 8.5 rebounds. We just talked about Rhea Marshall getting drafted late in the WNBA draft, an 8-point-a-game scorer. Kennedy Smith was really good in her freshman season at 9.5 a game. Avery Howell, Kaylee Heckle, Talia Von Olhoffen, all good role pieces as well. They had the huge win back in December over the eventual national champion UConn Huskies. They were 72-70 in stores. Like that is one of the best wins anybody got this
Yeah.
entire season. I
Yep.
think it goes forgotten because of what they did. At the best moments of the year were the UCLA wins. Of course, Juju puts up 38 at home in the first one, 30 or 32 in the second one. But the adversity was just a horrible. I mean, there's no good time for somebody to tear an ACL, but to do it in the NCAA tournament, it's horrible for so many reasons because A, it really ended their chances to win a national title, and B, puts them in a really big bind next season because she's most likely not going to play. next year. That would be the expectation, unless there's some sort of rapid, crazy ACL rehab she can do. But even then, is she going to choose to rush herself back, or
Right.
is she just going to heal herself for the WNBA? Is the more likely option, in my opinion. The other issues now is the portal. They lost Avery Howell. They lost Kaylee Heckel. Dominique Darius off the bench has hit the portal. They obviously graduate Kiki Iriafen and Rhea Marshall, who were just drafted. So now you're looking at a team that returns Kennedy Smith and Malia Samuels. And that's kind of it of the people who made really big impacts on this team this past season. Talia Von Olhoffen, another one that graduated. So this is going to be a really interesting year because Juju Watkins is probably not going to play. You don't return a lot of the core that you had along with her. So can they hit splashes in the portal? Some of the biggest names have already come off the board, like Latson from Florida State, Miles from Notre Dame, McMahon from Ohio State. So where do you go now if you're USC? It's just, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see if Lindsey Gottlieb can get this team. I think if they're a top 25 team that is a top 7 seed in the NCAA tournament, they've probably done something really well. Now, you can clip that here on April 15th, play it back to me next year when they win the national title and whatever. But when we'll talk about it more in the summer when we do their preview, or in the fall. But right now, I would say the outlook doesn't look amazing. Not that they're going to be bad. I don't expect them to be bad. But they're not going to be the national title contender they've been the past couple of seasons.
It's just so much loss. And maybe the toughest part of this to swallow, Austin, is, I mean, you talk about there's never a good time for your star player to tear ACL, but I thought USC in that backstretch of the season was starting to play its best ball. I think Watkins and Iria Finn, I think they all had kind of figured it out. It was meshing, it was coming together, and for Watkins to tear that ACL, that was terrible for so many reasons, but that one really, really kind of hurt.
Yeah, that was a
Um,
team that I think was built to beat UConn.
yeah, agreed.
And I mean, give them credit. It was a 5-point game going to the fourth quarter. They rallied in that third quarter and made UConn work for it. But yeah, I mean, that was a team that with Juju Watkins, her against Paige, you've got the size to go against Sarah Strong and make her life difficult down low with Iria Finn and Marshall. They were built to beat that UConn team, maybe better than anybody else was in the country. And to have that taken away from us as basketball fans was just a big bummer.
Absolutely. No,
Yeah.
I think you nailed it.
But we'll
All right,
see. I mean, they're gonna be the big question mark going into next season, no doubt.
completely agree. It's going to be an interesting preview when we find out what
Yes.
has come
Yeah.
in
They're
at
gonna
that
need to
time.
pick up some people. I'm sure. Now, I'm not in the recruiting. I'm not deep into recruiting class stuff right now. I'm sure they've got plenty of talent coming in the
Mhm.
25 class. They had an exceptional 24 class. I think losing the Heckles and the Howells is big. I mean, those
Yeah,
are two pieces that I think you were planning to build around in your future. And they jump ship. Heckle's still available. Howell goes to Washington. So they're going to be young again next year.
but you mentioned Washington. We only
Let's
got two
do it.
left. It's the two W's.
Let's
Let's
do
round
it.
them out. For Washington, this was a really good year under Coach Langley. 19-14 overall, 9-9 in the Big Ten. Went to the NCAA tournament for the first time since 2016 to 17. This Huskies team had 138 blocks this year. It's the second most ever in program history. If you're looking for best wins, I immediately go, Austin, to the first game of theirs of the Big Ten tournament, where it almost felt like, in a sense, Washington and Minnesota were playing for a big dance bid. It
Yep.
had that vibe to it. And Washington left no doubt. They beat Minnesota 79-65. That was back on March 5th. I think you can also point to the win over Illinois on New Year's Eve at Illinois, 84-75. That was a big one for the Huskies. But Delia Daniels, who was drafted last night, we've talked a little bit about, finishes second all time in Washington history for blocked shots, 160, had 207 for her career. Of course, she transferred in, so only 160 as a Husky. Had the fifth most double doubles ever for a Husky with 28 for her Washington career. But then you had Elle Ladine, who was third in the Big Ten at 19.2 points per game. She was fifth in the conference in field goal percentage at 51.5, led the Big Ten in three-point shooting as well at 44.1%. In the backcourt with her was Savia Sellers, who was a treat to watch throughout the course of this season. 15 points a game. She was seventh in the league in assists at 177. And you mentioned Daniels, the pick and pop, besides the interior defensive presence she brought, averaged 13 points, 7 rebounds a game. She ends up graduating, of course, and going on to the WNBA. They had a couple other pieces that graduated as well, but this was a really successful season for Tina Langley and the Washington Huskies. The piece of adversity I pointed to was the obviously the final game for them. They lost to Columbia in the first four, 63-60. That was on March 20th. That was a back and forth game. Washington had chances and just couldn't capitalize to get that tournament win, but they make it to the tournament for the first time in just about a decade and did it with Ladine and Sellers, who are back, by the way, for this group.
Yep.
And then you talk about the transfers. You mentioned Avery Howell, who comes over from USC. This is a freshman who's averaging 7.5 points per game for
and
the
got
Trojans.
big experience with the Juju injury, and even in the Big Ten tournament with the Rhea Marshall sickness, she started getting some starts down the stretch.
I was going to say, in those starts where she started the last two games for the Trojans, 13.5 points per game, 6 rebounds a game, 3.5 steals a game. I mean, and that's in the NCAA tournament, the Sweet 16 and Elite 8. So that's a huge piece the Huskies bring in
Kansas
with
State
Avery
and
Howell.
UConn. That's good. That's good competition right there.
Absolutely. So that's a huge piece for Washington to go with Ladine and Sellers. And then we mentioned earlier on as well, Yulia Grabowskaia from Michigan comes over to the Huskies as well, north of 5 points, about 4 rebounds a game. So Langley and the Huskies have done some work early in the transfer portal, but I thought overall this season was a really great one for Washington. I know we're not doing letter grades for everybody, but I'd put this in the A minus category, A category. I thought they did a really well job, and they were one of the more fun teams I thought to watch. Watching Ladine and Sellers create and hit shots, they both had a little bit of a microwave feature to them, where they got hot and they would really be grab the bucket of popcorn, sit on the couch, and kick back and watch and enjoy. I thought this was a great year, and I think they're set up for a pretty good future season there.
It's going to be interesting. There's 2 question marks I have with Washington, and one of them is a good question mark, which is there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen now in that backcourt because
Ladine and Sellers together.
And Steins, who was really good down the stretch of the season as well, who was the starter at the wing position. So you've got those 3. You're adding Howell into the mix. So there's 4 guards right there. Is it going to work to play Howell, Sellers, and Ladine together? That's not a lot of size, but it's a lot of scoring. So can that work? Is Steins willing to go back to the bench and be kind of the 6th lady on this team? The other one is Delia Daniels doesn't just grow on trees. She was a WNBA pick last night. So with Yulia Grabowskaia, she's a much different player than Delia Daniels. So can you run that pick and roll with Grabowskaia that they're gonna try, because that's what puts Ladine and Sellers in those positions. But can Grabowskaia execute it as well as Delia Daniels did, that puts so much pressure on the bigs defensively? That's a big question as well. And again, we're sitting here in April. It's gonna work itself out. Those are the things I'm tossing into the ether right now, of just like, I'm not saying it's not going to work. I'm very curious to see what Washington looks like if they try to stay as the same system, or if they adapt it to Grabowskaia's game and allow Ladine and Sellers to adapt in some way. I don't know how that'll work. And I'm also very curious how Howell mixes in with all of this. But like you said, on paper, they're loaded. This is a team that should be another tournament year for Washington. Should be, they were 12th last year in the Big Ten. They should absolutely be in the top half. You could make an argument. Again, we don't know what rosters look like right now, but maybe they're, when we're previewing the season, maybe they're a top 6 or 7 team in the league. They've got the talent to do it. So we'll see how that goes for Washington. One more team, last one here. It's the Wisconsin Badgers. Their leading scorer was Sarah Williams, just a hair under a double-double per game, 69 blocks on the year. She is gone, as is most of this team. Wisconsin was the one program that did undergo a coaching change during this offseason. So Sarah Williams, Carter McRae, Ronnie Porter were their top 3 scorers. They're all gone. Tess Myers was also a really good three-point shooter for them. Same with Natalie Leisinger. Their best win was the surprising 82-75 win over the Michigan Wolverines. A very, very good win there. They caught Michigan at a pretty good time coming off the tough loss to Michigan State. The adversity, though, was after opening the conference with a win over Rutgers in the early conference schedule. They then dipped back into non-con play. And then they came back into Big Ten play and lost their next 8 games. So they started 1-8 in the Big Ten. Now, they did a great job of picking themselves up and kind of making sure that they were ready to make the Big Ten tournament. They of those 5 schools at the bottom of the conference, they were the best of that bunch. They beat those, for the most part, beat those other teams down in the bottom of the league. So they did their job to make sure they would be in the tournament. But now Robin Pingeton comes in as the new head coach for Wisconsin and doesn't have a whole lot to build around, at least of returning talent. As we mentioned, Williams, McRae, Porter, all in the portal. Leisinger and Myers are gone. Lily Cron, who was a solid three-point shooter, but only averaged about 4 a game. She's the only real substantial player coming back from last season. They have their roster. Some teams already have updated their rosters online to go to 25-26. They have 6 players on their current roster right now. 4 of them are sophomores that didn't really play at all last season for Wisconsin. They've got a junior who didn't play much at all, and then Lily Cron. So they're going to have to hit the portal pretty hard. We expected that with a new coach. It's always going to be the case. It's an interesting spot with the new coach in Pingeton because sometimes you think new coach is going to bring players over, but she was fired from Missouri. So the influx of players coming over is probably not going to be there like we have seen from other coaching changes. So she's going to have to hit the portal in other areas and try and load up this Wisconsin team, who I really thought this year was primed to take a step forward, Dalton. I thought with Sarah Williams in her junior year, the Carter McRae ad, Ronnie Porter being a solid point guard, they had shooters around Sarah Williams too. I really thought this was going to be a year where they would take a step forward and push for the NCAA tournament, push to be up in the top half of the Big Ten. And it just didn't really happen. They weren't uncompetitive. They certainly gave teams a run for their money. They almost beat Maryland when they came to the Kohl Center. So there were opportunities for Wisconsin, but it's just kind of another same year as they had the year before.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I thought you have somebody like Sarah Williams that's one of the top talents in this league,
Yep.
and the pieces that we're developing around, maybe it could really kickstart into something. Of course, there were the stories and reports that came out of the off the court drama that
Yeah.
Wisconsin had to kind of go through in adversity. You wonder how much from the outside of a factor that maybe was for this team and program as a whole. But I'm with you. I expected a little bit more from Wisconsin this year. It was a tough year again for the Badgers.
Yeah, now they've got a lot in the portal, and they've got to go get a lot in the portal now. But as you've heard us throughout all these teams, a lot of teams have to go and get a lot in the portal. They're
Yes.
certainly not unique in that area. I've literally, as you've been talking, been refreshing Twitter to make sure I don't miss anything here live on the
Before
program.
we sign off.
Yeah, the only one is that a destination for Juliana Lamendola has been announced. She's heading to Grand Canyon from Indiana.
Okay.
So that's the only one of Big Ten note that has come out since we started the podcast. And that's how quickly it's changing. We've been on here for an hour and 15 minutes, and I feel like I have to keep refreshing because you never know.
Forget
that's
daily
it.
podcasts. We'll do hourly episodes now, Austin. That's
Daily hour episodes. We have wrapped a bow on this season. It's over. The season's done. Our exit interviews are done. I don't think we fired anybody. I think the whole staff is coming back next year. So that's good. Those are pleasant exit interviews. We're just trying to, we're just talking to people trying to improve. Nobody's getting fired. We're just trying to
all
improve.
about growing.
Yeah, we're
And again,
growing.
I mean, we talked about this last week, Austin. The coaching in this league,
So good.
so good.
So good.
This was one of the best years of Big Ten women's basketball ever. You could make the argument it was the best that this conference has ever seen with the 12 in. So all in all, there was a lot of reason to be pretty pleasant and pretty happy with these exit interviews.
Well, we'll talk about it as the offseason goes on, but the next step for this conference now, they were really deep this year. Now some of these teams have to take that step and become a little bit more nationally involved.
Yep.
Like getting 12 teams in the tournament was awesome, but they got three
in the Sweet 16.
Into the Sweet 16.
Yeah.
So the next step is, can a Maryland, can an Ohio State, can Iowa or Indiana get back up there? Can Illinois keep developing as a program? Michigan has light bulbs going off of like, this could be the team that makes that jump. Michigan State's been improving under Robin Freilich. As you mentioned, we have all these great coaches because it does look like USC is going to take a step down from that national pedestal. So the Big Ten, as good as it was, it'd be nice to see some more top-tier talent.
Agreed.
In this conference that we can talk about making runs into the NCAA tournament. Because, look, we've had a Final Four team now, 3 straight seasons with Iowa back-to-back and UCLA this year. Got to keep that going. UCLA seems like the most likely option, but maybe there's somebody who's going to find a Caitlin Clark-type talent who's going to make them take that big leap forward. We shall see. But we've kept you long enough here today. Again, don't expect an episode. I think we're going to take next week off on April 22nd. And then we will post our next episode on, the 29th of April. We're going to try and find some good guests to join us throughout the off season. I have some ideas cooking. I haven't done it. I just turned the stove on. I haven't actually put anything on the stove yet.
Preheating.
But, it's really dangerous to leave the stove on. But I'm thinking I got things churning. So we'll get some fun guests for you. We'll aim for bi-weekly episodes. We'll still try and air them live. They may be, I'm going to let you guys know now, they may be pre-recorded and airing live. It's hard to get people to exactly join us at noon on a Tuesday. So we're going to record these things when people are available, and then we will air them at noon on the Back Home Network YouTube channel. If there is a live episode that's another time, we will obviously let you know on the social media accounts. Give us a follow on Twitter, by the way, at Dribble Drive WBB is the handle on X. So give us a follow there. Keep you up to date on what's going on with the podcast. Dalton, thanks for putting in the work here for these exit interviews. I think our company's only going to get better from the great work that our employees are doing.
I think you're right. No, this was a lot of fun, and thank you too, Austin.
Yeah, we'll talk to you guys next week. Give us a subscribe, a download, a rating, all that stuff helps us. For Dalton Shetler, I'm Austin Render. Hard to believe we're 47 episodes into this thing, and year 1 is officially in the books. Talk to you guys in a couple weeks here on the Dribble Drive podcast.